In this video, we are going to cover the rebuild of 2004 CRF450 front forks. Forks are now completely disassembled. All the bushings, washer, oil seal, clip, dust seal, and outer clip has been removed. Dampers have been removed, springs have been removed, and our Showa CRF forks, both sides, have been completely disassembled and will be rebuilt in the next few days before we put this bike back together. Shot as well. So I'm going to lead you through the entire process of how to pull these apart, what to look for, and the first thing to do is to break the caps loose with that fork wrench. And then I leave them in the triple clamps to do that. Now I'm taking them out of the triple clamps, removing all of the bolts, and I will pull the forks out of the triple clamps. The forks, as you see them, are how I got them. So I'm going to start disassembling the triple clamp here. I'll pull the top off, kind of had to tap it with a rubber mallet a little bit to get it off, and then I'll pull the bottom off. And those bearings I will be cleaning and repacking later on during assembly. And then just take the cap off. But before you do that here, actually what I'm doing here is counting the clicks. So click it all the way in, screw everything all the way in, and count the number of clicks that you go in, and then keep track of that. I think the top was in 12 clicks and the bottom were 10, 12 to 14 on the top. So the bottom is your rebound, the top is your compression. And when I put these back together, I'll be 14, 15 clicks on the top and 10 to 12 on the bottom. So 14, 15 on the compression and 10 to 12 on the rebound. So that's the first step, and to back everything off, get the tension off of there, and then just go ahead and pull the first step is to break that loose with a wrench, and then just pull that damper assembly out and drain the oil. That's what I'm doing here. The oil actually didn't look like it was in that bad a shape when it came out of there, but it definitely needed to be changed. So if you look at the climber's manual or at your service manual, usually you should change your fork oil anywhere from 15 to 20 hours. Okay, now the next step in the process, once the oil is drained, and let it drain for 5 minutes or so, and the best thing to do is just turn that thing upside down and put the pan on the floor. I think I end up doing that. Just let it sit there and drain, and then start on the other fork. That's what I'm doing here. And now go ahead, since I already have those top screws broke loose, I can just, and I've already counted my clicks and taken all the tension off, I can just go ahead and remove the top. There's no pressure there or anything. You just unscrew the top cap. And again, we'll drop that outer tube down and drain that oil out of there. Let them drain for 5 minutes or so. Now there's going to be oil in the inner chamber of the damper as well. And you can drain that by just putting a wrench on that inner chamber, holding the outer chamber with the filter, or with the fork wrench, and then loosening that up and draining that. We're not going to do that here. I'm just showing the disassembly of the forks. So drained everything out. Now the next step is going to be to take the rebound out of the end, and in order to do that, you got to mount it in a vise. And so you want to break that rebound loose with a breaker bar because it's torqued down there. So just clamp it somewhere where it's not going to move and then break that loose. That's what I'm doing here. Okay, and then we're just going to unscrew that, and all this is doing is disconnecting the rebound end from the fork. Now the next step is there's a spring inside of there, a large spring obviously, that runs your entire fork assembly. And so we're going to have to turn the fork upside down and compress the bottom and push that damper up through. That's the next step. But this first, that's what I'm doing here. Push that rod out the bottom, the damper rod up through, and put a wrench in it to stop it. Okay, and now get a 17 millimeter. And then once you pull that cap off, then I'm just going to pull it off here. Okay, so now I have pulled that the cap off of the damper assembly, and now when I release that wrench out of there, it will let the damper assembly and everything drop back through the other side of the fork, and you can pull everything out and pull everything apart. Okay, so that's what I'm doing. There's the damper assembly there. So we pulled all that out. Now there is oil in the chamber at the top of that. I'm not going to show how to change that, but you can. And now the next step is going to be taking the dust seal off. Well, we'll take the spring out like I did there. But now the next step is going to be to take the dust seal, peel the dust seal back with a screwdriver. That's what I'm doing here. And then there's a little clip down inside, and I pulled that out. You got to pull that little clip out. And if you don't do that and you try to pull the forks apart, obviously it's going to cause a lot of damage. So you basically just pull that inner piece out of the outer piece. You might have to heat it up if it's not coming out, but I didn't have to here. But you pull that out, and there's all your bushings and your washer and all of your seals. You got the oil seal toward the left side of where I'm holding, toward my right hand in the video, facing the camera, and the dust seal and the clip and everything toward the other end of the fork. Here I'm explaining how those dust seal or those bushings at the end need to be replaced, because those are a brass, should be a brass color, and sand got up in there when that seal went bad, and see where it wore through the brass, and you can see. So now I'm taking those bushings off. So once you take that end bushing off, you can slide everything off of there and keep it in order. And at the beginning of this video, I showed the order that everything was in as it came off. So you've got that bushing on the end, then another bushing, then the washer, then the oil seal, then the clip, then the dust seal, and then another clip that goes on the outside of the brass fitting on the fork. Now I'm going to start on the other fork. So I was just explaining there, sorry, I'm having to do this voiceover because the voice in my video didn't record for one reason or another. So anyway, I was explaining there how the damper assembly works, you could slide that tube off, but we've got to take off, as I showed earlier in this video. I'm doing this on the other fork now. You've got to take that bottom damper cap off with a clicker in it, and you just use I believe it was a 17 millimeter that I used, and I'm just taking that off. Right now I'm unscrewing it from the bottom of the fork. Now once you unscrew it and break it loose, then you can push on it like I'm doing here. Then you put the 12 millimeter wrench in there to hold it. I recommend that Motion Pro stopper. If you do this very often, get one of those stoppers or make your own. And then I'm putting a 17 millimeter wrench on the bottom, and I believe it's a 22 or 24 millimeter socket, and that breaks that damper cap and clicker assembly loose off of the end. And once you get that off, then you can pull everything apart. Now I'm sitting there explaining everything and going through the bushings and the order of everything. So you've got the big thick bushing on the end, a little larger bushing below that, then a washer, then the oil seal, and then the clip that holds the oil seal in, then the dust seal, and then another clip. But in order to put all of this back together, and what I'm explaining here, you need a seal bullet or to put some tape around the sharp ends of that inner fork piece with the chrome on it. Now the other thing you want to do is check your forks, the chrome on your forks, and make sure there's no blemishes or sharp ends that are going to mess your seals up. Now I'm putting the bullet on there that I got from Motion Pro. It fits pretty tight on there, and then I'm going to put a little oil around the bullet so that things slide on there. And the order of everything that I'm going to put on there is a small washer. I'm going to just grab things one by one and put them on. Small washer that goes on the end of the brass, the outer brass covering. So that small washer goes on first. Then the dust seal, and put the dust seal on with the spring side down, facing down. So the dust seal will go on, and then the clip, and then the oil seal. Now the oil seal is going to fit pretty tight. The other alternative to using a bullet is to wrap the end of that with electrical tape. You can do that just as well. So what I'm doing here, I was unpackaging all of the bushings because I got OEM bushings. I realized once I got into it I had to rebuild the shock. Now I'm putting that clip on. Now the oil seal will go on. Now the oil seal fits pretty tight, but it went on. Once you get the oil seal on, you can take that bullet off. Now, sometimes it's a little difficult to take that bullet off, but see, I put that washer on, and then I was going to put that bushing on, and I realized you got to take that you can put that on, but you got to take that bullet off. So I'll have to take the bullet off, and then I can put the other two bushings on. I did put that bushing over the bullet. Okay, now I take the bullet off, and now I can put the last bushing on that fits very tight, and it clips. There's a bushing there. Now the last bushing, and it clips right onto the end. There's the last bushing, clips onto the end. Okay, and now the next step is basically just to insert that inside of the outer brass piece. Okay, and then you're going to want to drive the second bushing and the flat washer in with a 1.25 inch Schedule 40 PVC. That's what I'm doing here. Now I use a T that I split in two. I just cut it in two. But you can use, I like the T because it gives me a little bit more leverage, but a lot of times you got to get that thing on the ground, and I'm not pounding on the seal here. I'm just tapping that washer in. And once you get that washer and that bushing tapped down enough, driven in enough, then you go ahead and put the seal in. Okay, so there, now you can see I'm showing where the seal is down there. It's got to be deep enough that you can get that clip in, and I'm showing how it's got to be deep enough that you can get that clip in, because there's a small groove in there that clip goes into, and then the dust seal goes on next, and that's what I'm putting on here. Now with that dust seal, it's imperative that seal does not have oil on it. It's got to be completely dry to slip in there. If it's got oil on it, that dust seal, it will waffle. One side will pop in and the other side will pop out, and then you'll go to put the other side and then it'll pop out. It's like a bar of soap, wet bar of soap. So the best thing to do is to dry that dust seal off. Make sure that it's dry of any oil. Now I'm loading everything on the other fork and doing the other fork as well. So you've got an outer bushing at the end, then another bushing, then a flat washer. Now I'm putting it into the outer brass piece, and now I'll drive that flat washer and those first two bushings in with the seal driver before I drive the seal. I don't want to drive on top of that seal. And then I'll put the seal in. The seal should go pretty easily. Then I'll put the clip in, and then I go ahead and put the dust seal on. Okay? So the dust seal, there is the dust seal, or excuse me, there's the oil seal, and then I was putting the clip, sliding the clip down there. Now I'm sliding the dust seal into place. Spring side down. Again, make sure that dust seal is dry. Now everything is in place. Okay, dust seal's in place, spring side down. Everything has been installed. Now you can go ahead and install your spring and start installing your damper assembly. So there's a spring, put that into the inner tube, and the next step is the damper assembly. Make sure and inspect your assembly, make sure it's working, slide it in and out, make sure it's working properly. Just screw it on enough to get a bite to the end, and then you're going to want to, now that you've got the spring in it, there's going to be tension in there. Now you're going to want to pull that damper through, the damper rod through, and then get that 12mm wrench on the bottom of it. Okay, now we're going to put that damper cap back on with the clicker assembly in it. And we torque it down to 22 foot-pounds. We hold the bottom with a 17mm wrench. There I am torquing it, 22 foot-pounds. So now I'm going to show the assembly of the other spring. It's going to be in fast forward motion. And we're going to go through all the same steps. So install the spring, installing the damper assembly. Screw it in just far enough to get a bite on it. Flip it over, pull the assembly through, get your wrench on it. Okay, so here I am putting the cap back on and just tightening that down with the 17mm wrench there. And then I'll tighten that into the fork. So once I get it tightened onto the end of the damper, then I screw that down in and tighten it onto the fork. Okay, now I'll pull that wrench out of there, the bottom wrench. I'll let it drop down into the fork, and then I'll screw it into the fork and torque that down. So I'm pulling that wrench out. Now I'll screw it on in. There is our fork with our damper installed and our clicker installed in the bottom. And now we are just going to fill it with oil here. Take our shock oil and we'll fill it to 12. Fill it to the 12-ounce mark. So this shock holds 12 ounces. Approximately 330 mils. So we're just going to pour this 12 ounces down into the shock. Chamber. All 12 ounces, let it drain. That's it. Shock is rebuilt. Not get this super tight, but snug. So these forks were rebuilt for a project that I am working on called Project 450, where I took a 2002 CRF450 engine and I am restoring and building a bike around that. More videos to come on the rear suspension rebuild. I have other videos on the engine rebuild and the wheel lacing. So I'm getting ready to wrap this project up here in just a few weeks, so stay tuned for more videos. There will be another video on the complete engine assembly and also mounting new OEM plastics on older frames, how you can make your own brackets, and just some of the other aspects that went into this build, so stay tuned.